Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are out on the launch pad again today with another flight of the SKS shuttle on its way to Kawaii Protato Station with the next set of modules. It's actually plural this time, destined for the station. Alice Campbell is at the stick today with Bill and Alyssa riding shotgun, an engineer and a science respectively. They will also be fulfilling a 3 Kerbal to low Earth orbit contract. And, well, a relative inclination is good enough. So we'll kick on the SAS, we'll set the throttle to full, and we'll get this on the road. So, ignition sequence start. Let all those engines spool up, get the clamps off. And yeah, 1.05 off the launch pad today, so it's a little lackluster, I suppose. We're just gonna let it gain some altitude before we start pushing into our gravity turn, which will probably be considerably later than normal. We are coming up a little bit heavy. I guess I'll talk about the cargo a bit later, but while I have your attention, and I have this window open thanks to clicking on the MechJet tab, we should talk about all of this money that's sitting in here. For those of you who didn't make the live stream on Wednesday, I did talk about it a little bit there, but basically I went into force complete the last 3 Kerbal to a low Earth orbit contract we had. Because I forgot to do that. Apparently it changes the parameters when you bring home something that didn't go up on that launch because it doesn't make the new vehicle check, which is weird enough on its own. But anyway, I went ahead and I also force completed the 180 days Kerbal on mission or in space contract and the 1 year, seeing as how that we should have fulfilled both of those a few times over. We had Jaeger in orbit of the moon for a year, we had a crew in orbit of Mars for 5 years, we have another crew that's been on the moon currently for a year, we've got another crew in orbit of Mars currently, they've been there for a year, so I feel completely justified in force completing those contracts, seeing as how we've met the criteria, just since they weren't the active vessel for all of that time, they did not complete. That's basically the gist of it. I did not know the payout for all of them in total was going to be about 12 million space bucks. So yeah, there's that. I did spend a whole lot of that money. As you can see, we're down to 9 million now. I bought a lot of tech upgrade points and upgrade our VAB a bunch. I think we're at like 9 build points on all 3 production lines. I also invested a whole lot into R&D so that we don't take 40 years to complete our very long queue of research that we have built up. It's probably now only going to be like 37 years to complete most of the nodes that we have stuck in the queue. And I ordered a pair of Cerberus builds, so hopefully we'll get to see the SSTO go up sometime in the next year or so. We do have our Venus window coming up very soon. We've got a correction to make out at the Icarus 1, the Ganymede lander, out at Jupiter. Maybe we'll get to that this episode. It really depends on how well docking goes. And if you've been around the channel for a while, know exactly how well docking is going to go. Anyway, it is time to really lead into this gravity turn. I'm probably coming at it entirely too late. We're already supersonic, and we need to be leading over quite a bit more, and I need to pay attention to this relative inclination. So I'm going to pick all of you up in orbit. So, of course, it being my nature, I will go from leading in not nearly enough to leading in entirely too much. Had I only just seen the altitude and noticed that we are only at 20 kilometers while pitching over, then maybe I would have done things a little differently. Not that it was a huge tragedy or anything, although I was a little late in balancing out our EFT loadout. We did get to that eventually and regain some of that stability. I'm sure you could tell it was shimmying around just a little bit, but we were actually coming in way too low at this point because I got a little overly aggressive, although I was keeping that relative inclination pretty stable. I don't know if you saw that, just a very briefest of heat warnings that just popped up, but that's what caused me to do a very serious pitch up. I guess it would be pitch down since we're upside down technically. We're going way too fast for where we were in the atmosphere. Boosters down and away, that happened a while ago. There's our roll maneuver to put our belly into the wind, and just making final fine-tuning adjustments on trying to keep that relative inclination somewhat reasonable. I would like to start doing better than 0.05 at some point here, although this thing's a little wonky on the way up. Don't really know why. It just has a mind of its own, I guess. But keeping it around 0.05 is very decent. Means, generally speaking, you probably won't have to do an inclination change maneuver. You can just fold it into one of your other rendezvous maneuvers. But this time, obviously, being the exception. So, a brief minute about our cargo. We are bringing up a large external fuel tank to complete the bus stop aspect. Really, that's the whole point of this station, is to act as a fueling point for round trips from Earth to Moon and Moon back to Earth. We need to be able to refuel our prospective taxi craft, and also an observation cupola, because no space station would honestly be complete without some sort of Earth-chan observation window deck thing, although that will be the only part that is not connected living space compliant. I guess it could be if we put it on the docking arm, but we'll discuss that in the comments on where exactly this should go. If you're unhappy with my placement, please do let me know. Anyway, I'm going to turn you over to Old Me to finish out this burn. Alright, and there's our EFT jettison. We are at 786 by 161, which is generally good, because we need to let the station catch up to us. So we're going to take a second and shut down and lock the gimbals on our RS-25DEs. Gimbal locked. And stage in our AJ-10. And let's go ahead and get this cargo bay open. Any second now. There you go. Open. We get ourselves into orbital mode. Alright, and we should probably disable crossfeed. Oh, lock your tanks before you go too crazy on us. Yes, it has its own maneuvering system. It also has a lot of control cores because it needs them. That is our Earth-chan observation module, which is just barely being clearanced by the fuel tank. That is the primary purpose for the Kawaii Protato Station. It is mostly empty, because that's how we could get such a large tank in orbit. Aerosine and nitrogen tetroxide are very dense, so we needed a large tank. We will be refilling it probably off cheaper traditional rockets, but we figured, well, we can go ahead and bring it upstairs on this thing, because we make a lot of money doing it. Alright, let's unlock our liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and kick on our fuel cells. Get our batteries recharged. We're definitely going to need that. Take a quick save, because I tend to forget to do these sorts of things, and then start to plot our rendezvous any second now. There we go, quick saving. Fantastic. Alright, let's turn off all the junk we don't need to see. And, well, that's where our orbits actually don't cross, because we go so much higher than our station exists at. It's in about a 250 kilometer orbit. Oh, so we do go below it. Oh, let me see if we are high enough, that was dumb, to let it catch up to us. There's our station. So let's delete this node and see what happens to our relative orbits. Focus Earth so we don't kill ourselves. Okay, good. They are getting closer. We do cross orbits. Oh yeah, we have to stay in orbit for 12 days, but we will probably do that on the reverse side of this. So let's see what happens this next pass. That should bring us pretty close. Oh, passed. Okay. That's interesting. So before we get to that node, add maneuver, we need to catch back up with the station, which means slowing down so that we can speed up. I'll make our apoapsis 293. We need to be below our target's orbit. Oh, can we actually just go ahead and go for rendezvous this fast? I doubt it, but... Alright, 242. So that's the adjustment we'll make. That's 152 meters per second, not a big deal. Let's just go ahead and get around to the node, and then probably next pass we will be able to catch back up. 3 minutes out. Let's go ahead and get angled in. Let's bring up our resource panel so I can determine, yeah, electric charge staying topped off. That one fuel cell should be well more than enough to keep things going. And there's light of our 4 AJ-10s. And MechJeb doing a completely unnecessary correction. Or SAS, I can't tell. Whichever. Either way, it seems to happen a lot with this spacecraft, more so than others, and it's super annoying. Especially when you're trying to dock things, that it just randomly wants to go into a roll, or pitch up or down. Either way, it doesn't matter. Trying very delicately to compensate for our off-vector center of thrust versus our center of mass. This thing really needs another balance pass. I should really stop trying to build a Mars base and start trying to make this thing actually awesome instead of just in theory awesome. So we were a little ahead of the node, so there's a small relight to adjust for that. A little bit of a discrepancy, but now that we've got our orbit down to a reasonable level, I think we should start to catch back up with our station. Anyway, here's old me. Alright, that should put us below our target orbit, so let's see what happens next pass. We should... Boink, there we go. Get a little closer. So we'll try to make this node out here. Bring up our closest approach. And now the super exciting fidgeting with nodes. I do like how the closest approach tends to jump back and forth. Super annoying, and I wonder if that's because we technically cross orbits twice, so it's jumping in between the two. And if maybe we could get the orbit just right to where we just barely touched it, or really if our 2 points of crossing the orbit were so close to each other it wouldn't matter. Maybe this would be a little bit easier. But for right now, this is just what we have to deal with. Although really, when I make the burn, I'm going to rely entirely on the MechJeb window and ignore the node pretty much entirely, because that just, well, it just works better. And there's our node. 37.9 meters per second in 29 minutes. Let's go ahead and time warp ourselves a little bit closer. Alright. 2 minutes 48 seconds out from the burn. As soon as KSP catches up with us here, we'll go ahead and get ourselves angled in, which takes long enough to warrant me speeding up the footage in post and giving you this entirely unnecessary bit of commentary so as to avoid like a solid 30 seconds of dead air. You know, go figure. Alright, ullage. Ignition. Just going to watch very closely that separation at closest approach figure, because that's how we're going to do this, as usual. Oh, starting to go up already. Why? That's very interesting. It's already down to 2 kilometers, and apparently we've got 2 more meters per second, or 20 more meters per second left on this burn. That is very interesting. Either way, somebody did their math really, really wrong, because we are a lot closer with right now than I think we were at the end of that burn, and just trying to touch it up here and there on thrusters, although it is super, super slow going. It's still going, I suppose, So after wiggling around the thrusters a whole lot, a lot longer than I really had any right to do, we'll jump back out to the map and plot ourselves another node about 40 degrees, or no, 20, 25, maybe 30 degrees around the planet, to which is mostly an inclination change. It comes out to about 1.5 meters per second. It'll be 1.4 by the time we complete our roll, and we're just going to do it all on the back of RCS. And really, once we're angled in, we ignore the node completely and just go for only thrusters, which gives us a separation of closest approach at was 60. It jumped up to 87 meters and now up to 90 now that we're floating through time warp. Now a brief look around to see if we can't identify where the station is, as we're about a minute away, and bang, there it is. You have to press F4 to bring up the reticle, it turns out. But so we'll coast on in and eventually lighting our engines to zero out our relative velocity, and I was hoping to be a lot closer to the station than I was, but we'll just do a little backflip spin thing and try to bring ourselves in closer. And with that zeroed out, it's just a matter of doing a small about face and trying to get ourselves somewhere close to a docking port. Of course, the ever fun of super sped up footage, because dockings, especially with something this heavy, take absolutely forever. So we'll finish zeroing ourselves out. We'll roll ourselves into a correct inclination to hit this docking port, although I guess I could have avoided the roll and gone for the other long-armed docking port. But bringing ourselves in at less than half a meter per second, which is why this footage is so incredibly sped up. And now that I don't have anyone watching me live to do one of these, it actually goes a little bit better. Still not perfect. There's still this random force that just makes the shuttle overcorrect for absolutely no input whatsoever, which makes things extra frustrating. This time it was a roll. We would just randomly make our approach, and the thrusters would suddenly decide we need to roll right now. Made things a lot of fun. It did cause one or two back off and reapproach. Nothing too serious. Not that we dinged the station. We certainly didn't take out any solar panels or endanger any crew, but we did have to readjust. We would eventually kick on the thrusters from the Earth-Chan observation cupola to provide us with an extra little bit of oomph, even though they really shouldn't have that effect. We would also probably have heat-shielded thrusters with a little more kick behind them, were this an actual thing, so I don't feel as bad about gaming the game. I mean, of course I shouldn't. You've been watching me for a while, and you know that I exploit these little loopholes. Anyway, we are coming up on our actual docking, so we'll bring it out of time-warped footage, and I will turn you over to Old Me to be extraordinarily relieved that this whole dumb ordeal is over. Docked. Hooah! Finally. And with all the clearance. Alright, F5. Totally gonna take a quick save. What is up with the camera angle down here? Well, that's interesting. And the roll. RCS is off. Let's turn stability control off and do a little time warp, see if that fixes the roll problem. Alright, here's hoping. Anyway. Right. So then, not much fuel left in here, but we will try to top off our thruster banks here just to make sure everything goes smooth. Nothing ever goes smooth. I'll go ahead and lock those open in case I need to use more than one source. Out, out. Fantastic. Unlock those. How about battery? Okay, good. We had the good sense to lock those closed. Let's see how long that battery lasts. And this is basically so we can have avionics control over the station at any given time. Did I leave any electric charge in here? No, I did not. Alright then. Let's just go ahead and decouple node. Switch, RCS, stability control. Very good. We'll do a control from here. Don't know if that worked or not, but we have to be very delicate coming out of the cargo bay. Now, since this will be really easy to maneuver, we'll go ahead and dock the EarthChan observation module on the opposite side of the station from our current location. Oh man, are we going to have to like shimmy out of this? I did not foresee this being a thing, but okay. Let's take it nice and gentle. Okay. That looks clear. That's the axis I would like. No, not that way. Oh, this is going to be so much fun to fly. A pancake, for which I have no objective orientation. Fantastic. I hope you are ready for more dockings this episode. I'm well clear of the station. Oh yeah. So feeling extra confident in my docking skills, we will try to operate on one axis at a time. Of course, the thrusters being not set exactly to those axes does make things a little interesting, although control is still fairly solid, and we do have plenty of battery and lots of fuel. So if we have to do a back off and approach, we can, but instead we'll just come in hot and kind of brute force our way on. It looks way worse than sped up footage, believe me. Docked. Nice! That's awesome. Let's open. Oh, no, crew report. Open hatches. There we go. That shouldn't interfere with an SKS docking on this port, but I don't think there's absolutely anything on here currently that's going to interfere with an SKS docking on this port out here, which may have to be a thing for future things and stuff. Alright, quick save. Oh no, now I totally should have put the observation cupola on the other side. Cause, yeah. Alright. Well, maybe. Maybe. Let's get the fuel tank out of here. Let's go ahead and empty most of it, I suppose. That's only like 870. We'll be transferring a lot of this fuel back after assembly is complete. Dang it, dang it, dang it. I feel kind of dumb because I don't think that we can get the fuel tank docked where I want it with the shuttle here, so that's a problem. I also want it to be as light as possible when we are docking, for, you know, reasons. So maybe what we'll do for the time being is just put it here, and we just pick it up, slap it there, and then after we disembark the shuttle, we'll move it to down here. We'll just get it docked to somewhere and then get it fueled up. Maybe we will just leave it here. I mean, won't interfere with docking on this port, or that port being right there. It's just not really where I wanted it to be, I guess. Alright, good enough. F5. And now it has no control modules on it. That's why we have our little tug friend here. Make sure his battery is topped. Not quite. Fix that real quick. Bing. Your fuel's looking pretty good. Excellent. Undock. With our favorite, somewhat inadequate tug. At least this time it will have an extra set of thrusters on the payload itself to provide an assist, which is and super nice to have. I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of kicking myself now for not making this thing a little bit better. Although I think if it had arm extensions on it, we wouldn't have been able to fit it in the cargo bay around this fuel tank, which is just pushing the very limits of what we could fit this trip. But very slowly and very delicately, we'll ease it into the cargo bay, making extra sure not to scratch any of the paint or ding a thruster nozzle. But yeah, here's old me. Gotcha. Alright, let's do the thing. Decouple node. Control from here. Nope. Cleaning away. God, I hope. Now we have to spin it around. As target. Would it be easier just to loop around to the other side? Go over it and around and plug it in there? Yeah, it might. Let's do that instead. Decent balance on it so far, that's good. Hopefully this won't take 1,000,000+ years. Oh no, we've done what? 1, 2, 3 dockings. About to do our 4th and possibly final docking. Which, considering how painful dockings with this tug have been in the past, is actually not that bad. Just the fact that the shuttle bay was not aligned at all on axis with the docking port, so we'll come over and then shift off to the side and then readjust our angle in towards the docking port before making our approach. Of course, the controls are just a little weird because nothing really seems to point the way it wants to, but eventually those magnets will take effect, and, well, here's old me. Docked! Yes! Well, you know, it's kind of coming together. Of course, we're going to move it later, so there's that. Looks like all of the other fuel on the station itself should be all nice and topped off. Same with the life support. Yeah, it's all topped off and waiting for a crew. Perfect. Alright, so we're just going to put a whole lot of fuel back in it, including this entire tank in barely a dent. These 2 tanks, I think I will actually, well, because we're going to need our OMS still, so I'm going to leave some in there still. We'll come back to them. How about that? In. That's definitely empty. Yep, okay. You 2 in. That one should be empty. Yes. And our nose cone in. Next to nothing in all of that. Next to no fuel in the whole dumb thing. I don't know why I was so worried about that. We got 10,000 fuel Each of these has 1,000, so that's probably about $5,000 total there, so that doesn't quite offset the weight there, but yeah, you know, these things happen, and since our crew isn't going to hang around for all the silliness of redocking the thing again, I am just going to do a little bit of logistical fuel pumping before we finish out this mission. Of course, the shuttle will disembark, it will pull away from the station, complete its 12 days in orbit, and then return to Earth. After they have broken free, we're going to take our gigantic fuel tank and move it around to the correct docking port and leave it there, probably with the tug still attached. And this way, when it's on the correct port, here, all of our thrusters hopefully will be in line with each other and give us some semblance of actual control over the station itself, which I guess is nice. We did it at pretty little part count, I suppose, which is nice. Alright, let's lock these two open. And we need pump fuel here into the nose. Get ourselves at least in something that resembles a landing configuration. Alright, but I think I've kept you here long enough, so that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So, until then, see you later.